Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you live from the Defense Against the Dark Arts class. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone, to another week of the podcast. We've got a lot going on today. We've got plenty of Formula One to talk about. We had testing. We have the Bahrain Grand Prix coming up this weekend. So a lot of topics to hit there. We've got a couple of good League of Legends series over in the LPL and LCK. And of course, as always, we've got some Magic talk. So we'll be getting into it. But Justin, how are you? How's your week going?
Yeah, week's been going pretty well. Good to see you. Happy to be here for another week of the pod. But yeah, I think we've got a pretty packed show here for the people. So let's keep it moving here. Aaron, won't you tell me about your Rose, Thorn, and Seed here for the week?
Sure. So my rose for this week, I had completely forgotten about this until about 2 hours ago. But I got all jazzed up. But Survivor is back. It's one of my favorite shows. I love it. So that starts off tonight. No spoilers, anyone. But I'll hopefully have watched it after the podcast. So I'm excited about that.
Do you know what the twist is here for the show?
Not this season. They usually are. I think they may have announced it on at the very end of the last season, but I don't really remember. They're all,
Gotcha.
I mean, whether there's like a specific twist or it's just like the way that they divide up the teams or anything like that at the start, they do a pretty good job of mixing it up. And they don't do things that are as like questionable, I think, as they used to back when back in the day. Some of the ways they broke up tribes would probably be frowned upon now, whether it's like age or gender or anything like that. So
Gotcha.
it was, those are pieces of the times that they were in. So
Well, fair enough. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing about that as your visual medium here over the next coming weeks, I'm sure.
yeah, so excited about that. My Thorn is this week. I've just had some stomach issues. Not really sure what's going on, but stomach just feels like twisty and grumbly throughout the day, and I'm not like hungry. I'm not. It's just feels like it's just gurgling down there, boiling a brew for the potions. So I don't know what's going on, but it's more annoying. It's just a constant kind of just unease there. So I hope I am back to normal soon. My body is always just falling apart week after week. There's just a new ailment that that's my thorn of the week. So
Yeah, man, you sound like one of my clients always tell me it's rough getting old. I just have to tell them, yeah, so I hear.
back pain, then headaches, then stomach stuff. So my body's just been going through it. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to change something up. But my seed for this week is that I just have I'm delving a bit more into doing work on my car to like fix up things and like save myself some money and whatnot. So I've been missing a hubcap for a while, and so my car's been looking pretty ghetto. So I just am at a point. I'm like, this car looks beat up. I've got scrapes in it in the side. I had like little like smears of other cars' paint from scraping up against me as they're going around the corners and stuff near where I live. And I bought a new hubcap to put in. So hubcap just got here today. It's going to be replaced. My car will be back to looking a little better. I did some research and work a few weeks back about like what you can use to get like other cars' paint off your car. And so for anyone who wants to know, it's WD-40. You spray that on and like buff it with like a buffing sponge thing, and takes it off pretty well. Takes a little bit of elbow grease, but
Sure.
I'm also planning to change my spark plugs.
Well,
So I've always had I like doing hands-on things. I like building things. I like fixing things. It's like it is fun for my mind to figure out and everything. And so from looking some of these things up, and obviously getting a hubcap is like not a big deal. It's just pay a little bit of money and my car looks fine again.
sure.
But I think doing these like little things that I can do and that I feel are easy enough if I follow the instructions to not ruin something, but I can save hundreds of dollars by doing it. I'm just like, why not? I'll spend a little bit of time to figure it out and do it, and then I'll just be saving some money. So I'm just excited about that. I think it's a good skill to have, and it's not something that I really was able to learn when I was younger. My dad's not a car person at all.
Right.
He would change his own oil, but that was about the extent of it. But I've like done small things, changed light bulbs in cars and little things like that over the years. So I'm just expanding my ability to take care of my car a little bit better. So
There you go. That's pretty cool. I like to hear it.
yeah. So that's my rose, thorn, and seed. Not my flavor of the week. But what have you been getting into? What's going on with you this week?
So my rose here for the week has been the recent Hunt like Twitch drop event, bringing attention to the game, bringing attention to the like players who stream it. Couple of gun skins, legendary hunter skins, and just getting to watch some fun gameplay with the streamers. Extended hours, fun games. So the Twitch event has been really fun in that regard.
Do you know if they do that for like lots of different games, or is it like something that Hunt kind of maybe pushed to partner with Twitch for it to boost the game?
It seems like there's a bunch of games that do it. Like Don't Starve Together does it as well. They do like drops every now and again. I think there's ones for
like I've seen it for big games, which I like in my brain made sense. Like League obviously has it if you're watching on certain channels and whatnot.
Right.
You can get drops or just lots of them have that kind of thing. Call of Duty had plenty of it too, and like the Twitch rivals and those kind of bigger events. But
right. So no, I don't think it's like Hunt specific, but I think it definitely helps bring eyes to the game because they can do the like pay for cosmetic skins. I think that they can do those as drops is what I mean. It's a great thing to do and doesn't really cost them any money to do, but brings a whole bunch of eyes to the game, which is sweet. So that's been really fun. And then my thorn here for the week, I kind of lost my shit on Thursday when MetEd turned off my power for some kind of fixing out in the alley. And when I called the guy, it wasn't frustrating until I called the guy and he effectively told me that it was our fault that we weren't notified that the power was going to be shut off for, whatever amount of time. Something about a verification, something about them not having our email, something about, I'm just like, dude, I lost my shit. I was like, all right, man, I appreciate your help. We're not going to have this conversation.
How do they send you your bill?
Over email.
But they didn't have your email.
Right.
Oh,
right.
And I'm sure they don't know your service address, the place that you live that they have a meter at and bill on a monthly basis.
Right.
Definitely couldn't have sent you a letter saying emergency maintenance will be going on in a window of X time on X day. you may have power outages intermittently throughout that time. No, that would be too tough. I mean, I definitely don't send those kinds of emails out to all of my residents on a semi-weekly basis. No, couldn't be done.
Really tough. So you can imagine I didn't spend a whole lot of time hearing that and just ended up obviously dealing with it. No big deal. It wasn't throughout the whole day or anything, but I definitely got a little frustrated. Definitely colored my Thursday a little red, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I don't wish that guy gets anything great for Christmas come the end of the year. But my seed here for the week, in our Magic games that hopefully we'll get to talk about a little bit later. We finally were able to do pick ban games again, and
Nice.
immediately at the end of the night it was like, all right, so how'd everybody feel about the pick ban? And it was like, it felt great to just say I don't want to see that. And I was like, whoa, what a surprise. The thing that we all talked about before, we just all collectively forgot. And on Monday we all remembered it, so that was pretty fun and funny overall. And just bringing it up as my seed here this week because it's something we had talked about previously. I was looking forward to it. Finally got him in, and yeah, it was just a good time, a good way to build the pods where pretty much everybody's happy. It went really well.
Well, and now I think at this point with it too, you have your pod for the Commander 9 League has been playing long enough that the guys who were newer when you because you used to do pick ban.
Yeah, and then we onboarded a bunch of newer players who didn't have as many decks.
You went away with it because you're like, yeah, we can't ban out all of your decks. You'll have nothing to play with, or we can't target you to force you to play one specific deck. So, but that's cool that you're able to be back to it. That everyone's developed themselves as players and collectors enough to do that a little bit more. So nice.
Yeah, I was super pleased. I thought it went really well. But yeah, just a bunch of magic going on this week that, like I said, hopefully we'll get to talk about later. But this previous weekend, we were packed with Formula One action, a bunch of sessions over 3 days. And we'll get to the Bahrain test here in just a little bit. Aaron, did you have any points you wanted to hit before that?
Yeah, just a couple, and a couple of topics I thought might be interesting to discuss. But for one, just a other esport kind of funny story that I saw in this. So there were some online Mortal Kombat tournaments lately featuring some of the best players in the world. And so but anyone I think could sign up for this tournament if you're at a certain level or whatever.
Like open play-ins.
Yeah, exactly. And so in this tournament, there is a player that signed up that his name is just Arena is Free, which is, I think, what the, I guess, play map or whatever is called in Mortal Kombat is the arena. So he's just going into this tournament. No one knows, since it's online, no one knows if it's another professional player behind the name. It hasn't, he isn't out there saying who he actually is. But he has just been destroying everyone and plays every single character in the game, so it's not someone who's a one trick or anything like that. And then he just turbo teabags, so beat you up and then just back off and just teabag a ton of times, and then will win and then just leave the game when you after winning. No chatting, no anything else, just comes in, kicks everyone's ass, it just makes them look silly, and then it's just yep, I'm out. And his name is Arena is Free. So I thought that was pretty amusing that it's just this random guy just trolling people. And I like to think that it's like some nobody who's not like a professional player who just like has grinded this game on all these different characters and is just like stomping kids. So I think it's just a funny story.
Sure. Unfortunately, it seems like a situation like this doesn't really happen if like dudes got to walk on stage. Like this is just like an online tournament, right?
Right.
So yeah, he definitely has the benefit of that, where he can play the the roguish type behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's just funny. Like he's not doing anything too toxic. Like Turbo teabag, like people teabag in any game that they can figure out how to do it. So
yeah,
that's not that big a deal. It's just kind of funny.
Interesting. I'm curious. I don't know a whole lot about Mortal Kombat, but I'd be interested to watch the finals or just like get an understanding of like how he lost actually. Because if a player like that is prolific on a bunch of different heroes, champ pool pretty wide, seems pretty strong. But I'm curious what the other player did then in the finals to say like, oh, like is it cheese? Is it good? Is he just like turbo fucking around? Or was there like an actual strategy that he was employing that was like it was obviously beatable?
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to see like what his in-game strategy was, and then like how it was beaten, because that sounds impressive. Would have been cooler if he won.
Right. So
sure,
but pretty interesting. Like it's so rare. It's like when for a while on the Korean server for League of Legends, when players were just changing their names to like a mixture of I's and L's, and just everyone was calling them barcodes. Like you didn't know who was who. So I think it just reminds me of that a little bit, where it's like an anonymous person just going and crushing it out at a game. And you don't see that too much. I feel like most people who are out there playing these games professionally do want some sort of recognition of some sort to their name. So it's almost a flex to just be like he's getting attention, but it's no one's gonna be like, oh my god, that's this person. It's just like he himself is just like enjoying the ride a little bit. So
yeah, that's a pretty fun way to go about a tournament.
Yeah. So a couple of quick topics that I wanted to just get your thoughts on. And so one, and I'll talk about it a little bit more later on, but I was watching the show with Colleen, and the person in it was talking about like he's visiting different areas of the world to experience different cultures, and he kind of kept saying it in different ways of like what they say in that area, but kind of like what is your truth like in life, like what is just like your core, like is there some sort of core belief that like brings you happiness or brings you like or whatever. And it was just
was the documenter asking the question, or was he being asked that question?
I think he was kind of seeking out what that question is in these different cultures, like what is this like this communal kind of belief, or this like saying that they say in like your country that just is like a almost like mantra of the culture, and like trying to delve into that and understand it a bit more. I'll have to look up like an example of it, but he goes to like in one of the first episodes he goes to Finland, and so he is like Finland is considered to be like one of the, I think like he's saying it's considered to be one of the like happiest like place or countries to live in if you're like on those like polls and things like where they measure like life expectancy and like general happiness and all. And so he was kind of going there to be like, well, what makes Finland this kind of place that people are just like happy here? And they were talking about like Finnish sayings that are like about happiness or about like he's asking the people like if you had to describe like life in 3 words, what would they be? And they're like family, nature, and animals was what the one guy said. And so it's just like these kind of like unifying like things about a specific culture that maybe relates to something like overall happiness, life expectancy, things like that. So it was my kind of thought watching this, or well, not while watching it, but thinking about it on my ride to work the other day. I was like, that seemed the documenter is like pretty old. He's like in his 70s, and so I'm sitting here and I'm like, I am going to work 5 days a week. Working hours, commuting, cooking dinner, taking care of the dog, podcasting, like doing other stuff with friends, trying to have some sort of free time or exercise or whatever. Like I'm doing all these things, but like I almost feel like I don't have time to like be philosophical in any way, like to really think that deeply about like my life or these other things. And I know that that's something that like you can set time apart for, but I feel like in the rush of life I don't always think about it. And I was like, I wonder if this is just like something that older people or people with more free time get to like think about. I'm like, I just feel like I'm too caught up a lot to like delve into those things that much, other than these like sporadic thoughts. And so it was interesting. Like, do you feel like, I know you do some like meditation and different things like that, but do you feel like you're more so just like trying to like relax and kind of rest and recuperate your body and mind, or are you like thinking about these different philosophical quandaries that you might have out there in the world at all?
Okay. So a lot of thoughts come up when you say this stuff. So first I'll answer your question. It often like my immediate meditation strategy kind of differs day to day, depending on how focused I can get. But one kind of mode that I have that I've deemed is acceptable, like as time spent, is allowing my brain to kind of pick apart a problem or like an idea about something that's happened like recently around me.
So it's like a singular focus as opposed to like just trying to clear your mind.
Sometimes.
Okay.
But there are some times where, you know, when I set the timer, I immediately start with a breath in, and I kind of do the I don't know if you've ever seen Office Space, but it's the big guy that I think about when he's like, okay, deeper and deeper. And he's like trying to get Peter to relax. Like I do a little bit of that, and then I just focus on my breath. And when I'm doing that, I'm trying to relax every muscle in my body and get to a point of like of being headless, forgetting about my like corporeal being and trying to
You're just like feeling your body and like what it's feeling, kind of.
And just like totally relax, not think about anything, keep everything totally clear. So there are definitely different modes to it. Okay. So having said that, now when thinking about like not enough time to be philosophical, fair enough. There's a certain sense in which, to a certain degree, you are the embodiment of those like ideals that this guy's trying to get people to tell him about: family, providing, community. Like literally everything that you mentioned as what you said is like, I'm too busy for life. Literally everything you mentioned was like a friend or a family member, or it was something that was directly related to providing for those people. Like you said, work, you said podcasts where, you know, a bunch of our friends listen and this is like kind of for them. So in a way, I would argue that you are kind of embodying ideas and values without having to like spend shower thought time saying like, well, what do I care about as a man? If anything, you are just doing it. You are doing what you care about. So don't think you don't have time, because I would argue you're doing the thing.
Okay.
And then wondering about this guy's strategy, like, I gotta be honest with you, bro, like that sounds horribly reductive from like his point of view. Trying to reduce like a whole culture into just like a succinct little idea. I think that behavior in and of itself is not treating these cultures with enough respect, because most of them are going to be much older than we could even fathom in like American US society. So it's going to have mutated, it's going to have changed, and depending on like what generation you ask or what region of the country you ask, like it's going to mean a totally different thing. So trying to capture like a whole region or like country's quote unquote truth, I mean, my guy, yeah, he just sounds a little bit old and not with it enough to realize like one guy's little phrase is not gonna like be the meaning to life.
Yeah, I think it's so I did also reduce like the show itself a little bit just to try and like more hone in on my point, because and I will agree, I think he is not the most at different times of the show, he's not the most apt at like understand, like he's not the best interviewer in the world or the best like he's not bad at it, but the a lot of things he's doing at other points in the show where he's not talking as much as he is experiencing things from the cultures that he's going to try and like see it also like acted out and kind of get a feel for it. So he's like combining it, but like the questions he asks and the way that he understands it, or his narration in the background, sometimes I was a little like not as great, but he's also just an actor who's doing this, and so as opposed to a like someone who's trained in the art, as it were. So
Sure.
But I appreciate your point on that I think it's just, if I had to sit down, like yeah, I said all those things that I do and that I like enjoy and like to spend time doing in my life and all, but I think if I had to sit down and just be like, well, what do I really believe in life? Like, I don't know if I would have thought of that if I would have gone to, well, what do I like to do? Well, what does that mean? It's like the deeper thought of it is, it's I live my life every day because the way I do, because of just the person I am, and I guess that comes down to your core kind of goals and beliefs, but I don't know if I could have pinpointed what they were that easily.
Fair enough.
So, but an interesting thought. And so, if anyone out there has any thoughts on it, feel free to chime in. Hit us up in the comments on YouTube or Spotify or anything. Twitter.
Yeah, tell us what you think the
One.
meaning of life is.
Yeah, and don't give me the number 42 or whatever it is from that movie.
I mean, the meme has lasted long enough that I've got to wonder, like, maybe that is the right answer.
It might be. But another kind of life meaning that I wanted to just briefly discuss. So I was watching this short interview clip that I saw on Twitter the other day with Lewis Hamilton. And so the interviewer is a young British gentleman who happens to be gay. And so he is talking to Lewis and basically is like, I've really wanted to interview you for a while because I wanted to tell you how much it meant, the support you've given towards the LGBTQ community and everything in the recent years. He's like, I felt like this is something that is like has been impactful in my life kind of thing. And I'm like, I was thinking about it, and the thought that came to mind was I like compared him in my mind to Tiger Woods, because I'm like, Tiger, and so some background for Tiger Woods. Growing up, his father kind of wanted him not just to be this famous golfer and everything, but wanted him to be almost a like just outside of sports larger than life figure as well. Like his
was he not?
Well, I guess in different ways. So more of a Tiger's father had said things like Tiger will do more than any other man in history to change the course of humanity. He is the chosen one. He'll have the power to impact nations, not people, nations.
When did he say this? How old was Tiger?
Tiger was young. Like from
was he like playing
on.
golf? Was that why he is quoted to be saying this? Was it like an interview?
So it was, I think once he was like starting to get to the age where he was playing, like he was probably, I think, I'll have to see. I think he was still probably in his at least early teens at the time.
Okay.
So this interview that I just searched the quote and found an interview from 1996. So
whoa. Okay, gotcha.
And Tiger Woods in 1996 would have been, he would have been about 20 years old or so when that interview came out. So I don't know if that's when the quote's from or what. I would imagine though. But he also believed that his son could have a greater humanitarian influence than Mandela, Gandhi, or Buddha. And so, obviously, Tiger's dad bit out there. I think that's pretty extreme in general to think that to just assume that your child is going to be bigger than some of these just like immense characters in history. But I think that the kind of person that Lewis Hamilton is, like on and off the circuit, is in my mind kind of what Tiger Woods' dad was like looking for from Tiger. Like Lewis is impacting all these communities, whether he is a part of them or just an ally. He's affecting people that he doesn't even like know that he's affecting until it comes up in an interview, or he's going and spending a lot of time doing these philanthropic and humanitarian efforts by raising awareness about issues and whatnot. And so it's I just find it very interesting, like, to see two people who have gone up and become essentially one of, if not the greatest in their sport, relatively parallel lifestyles, and the one who was tried to be pushed and forced into that direction didn't end up being that person as much as the one who, I think, like Lewis, it has, I think, just from life experience and all, been kind of guided in that direction as opposed to being pushed.
I'm not sure exactly what your point is, but I might argue that had it not been for Tiger Woods enjoying women so much, he may have like reached that point.
He might have.
I mean, I'm thinking, like, I'm looking at, you Google Tiger Woods donations. He has his own charity organization. Maybe maybe Lewis Hamilton's got the gay vote, but I'm curious if there's a vote that Tiger Woods has that Lewis Hamilton doesn't have. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I do personally, I don't know if there is, because
Fair.
other than the maybe parent vote, because I think in recent years especially, people have Tiger has actually grown into being a really good father to his children, despite his other issues. And I also didn't mean to say that. So, like, Tiger Woods is one of my favorite athletes of all time, so I know a decent bit about him.
Sure.
But I think, well, the women issues he also gets from his father. His dad used to have quite his fair share of ladies that he had encounters with. And so I did also think about that, like the nature versus nurture, almost like the nature of these two gentlemen are to be these extreme competitors. They are driven to be the best. They really strive for like greatness in their individual pursuits, and they had the support from their family on both sides to like go after that from an early age. But also there's the nurture part where, like, while Tiger Woods' father was having hookups while they were away at golf tournaments, Anthony Hamilton went and worked 4 jobs to help afford Lewis being able to pursue his like aspirations in racing at a young age. And so like I don't think there was that's kind of why before the pod I was like, I don't know if there's like an exact point of this. It was just an interesting thought I had, like thinking of these two people who could have been in very similar shoes in like terms of humanitarian and like those kind of efforts. But Lewis, I think, is just when I think of him, I think of him as a racer and then a philanthropist, but like they both pop to mind when I think of Lewis Hamilton. When I think of Tiger Woods, I mostly just think about him as a golfer, like as an athlete.
Gotcha.
So
interesting.
But just knowing that Tiger Woods' father had aspirations of him to be this big humanitarian and everything, it was something that I'm like, that's interesting to see the kind of parallels or not quite parallels between the two.
Yeah, so maybe Tiger Woods' dad just goes to bed goes to bed thinking, "Fuck, my son
Well,
should have been Hamilton."
No, he went to bed for the long sleep a while ago, so maybe he's thinking about it now.
Maybe that was his last thought, is what I meant.
There you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, not a main point. It was just an interesting thought that I kind of let my mind follow for a little bit, and didn't know how interesting or uninteresting it might be, but thought it was interesting to me.
I feel like you would need to compile more data, because it seems like for somebody who's in the know about both individuals and both careers, you'd be able to find like key and core differences.
Oh,
But
I'm sure, yeah.
To a layman, just like on name recognition, I feel like you're splitting hairs. And depending on which country you're in, if you go over to any European country, they'll likely know Lewis Hamilton more than a Tiger Woods. But over here in the U.S., like, dude, nobody knows who the fuck a Lewis Hamilton is. Everybody knows who Tiger Woods is. So
That's fair.
So I'm not entirely sure. However, this one guy's interview from the Fast and the Curious definitely makes me believe that Lewis Hamilton is a S tier philanthropist, and nobody is higher.
Yeah, he's definitely a great person, and it's I think another thought I had is it's not super common to find someone who is at the top level of being a competitor and who's also at the top level of being like just a good person, and not just that, like, not saying that everyone who's great at their sport is a bad person, but like someone who spends so much time actively putting their energy out towards like positive goods and everything. There's always people in every sport that do, but he is like doing both at a very kind of extreme level, being a like one of the best of all time in Formula One, and just so active in the communities and all that he is a part of. So, but I digress. I have one more quick note before we get on to the Formula One testing, but Susie Wolf, Toto Wolff's wife, was appointed as the managing director for the F1 Academy, which has a big focus, obviously, on female drivers and their kind of growth in the sport and everything. And as someone who is driven professionally as well, I think it's a great fit. She seems like a very driven person, similar to her husband, and they both and I think that's a big win for the F1 Academy to have her kind of spearheading that.
It seems like a good thing for Mercedes too to have an agent there in the academy to say like, oh yeah, by the way, wife, what drivers look good? Anybody that you want to pull up? Oh no, Toto, stop! No, that's a conflict of interest.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's that as well, but I think in terms of the person, experience, and everything, she suits the role very well. Whether she feeds a couple of prospects Toto's way here or there,
all of a sudden the reserve driver list just gets like 5, 6, 7 drivers deep. The academy squad has like 3 drivers. Toto just keeps taking them all.
Yeah, just signing them up. But a cool thing as the F1 academies being developed a bit more after the W Series had gone away. I think it's a great way to still emphasize like the growth of women in the sport. So
it's fucking brutal.
What?
The W Series going away, like that's tough.
Know. So I'm glad that it's at least somewhat replaced in a way.
Yeah, sure.
So, But moving on to the F1 chit chat, we had testing, of course, this past weekend. At the end of the day, the Red Bull came out on top. Sergio Perez had the fastest time of the weekend. What were your, I guess, big thoughts going through, looking at it? Were there any teams that really stuck out to you, good or bad?
I think a worthy place to start would be McLaren. They really kind of got the short end of the stick in that regard, being that they had a bunch of technical issues. Lando was out of the car and for a good amount of time. I think it was on day 2, so they lost time there. And from Zach Brown's perspective, the car is not hitting a lot of marks. There's like aerodynamic issues. They have a lot of drag, and not sure if it was like a manufacturing thing or whatever, but part of their like little wheel cover things weren't really working. They were spending a whole lot of time on them.
They had to weld plates to them to stop them from breaking off in the wind. I hope that's just a manufacturing issue.
But it is indicative of yes, an easily fixable issue, but when you have such limited time, when you have such limited track time, and that's literally eating away minutes from each of your sessions, no matter what the problem is, that's just tough. So I think McLaren really got a weak start out of the gate here.
Yeah, and especially with having a rookie driver coming in for them, and the two of them, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, were 18th and 19th in terms of laps run on the weekend.
Yeah.
Only above Felipe Dragovic, who was filling in for Lance Stroll, who put Aston Martin kind of in a weird, not Lance did not intentionally put them in a weird position, but they're kind of like in this weird spot of, we need Dragovic to get laps so he's comfortable in the car somewhat if he needs to drive at the Bahrain Grand Prix. But also we want to get quality testing time in with our main drivers, which ended up with a big old Aston Martin sandwich with Fernando driving the most laps on the weekend and Dragovic driving the least laps on the weekend.
Yeah, and that was a tough spot to be in, definitely for the Aston Martins. But interestingly enough, Fernando Alonso was quoted as saying that he misses Lance actually in the garage, because he can't be sure, especially porting over to a new team. He can't be sure if things that are going on in the car are legacy Aston Martin things that he should just come to expect, or if they're things that are coming up in the weekend. So having a little bit of that Aston Martin specific experience, Fernando Alonso was definitely lacking. So that's interesting coming from, the two-time world champion saying that I really wanted my partner there to help pour over the data and see what's going on. I thought that was an interesting take from the Aston Martin driver.
Oh, absolutely. And to have Lance there, who like you've said has a lot of experience with the team. He's been there with this same team for years now. He has a bit more of those insights. One interesting point from this. So Lance Stroll, his injury, apparently, I was just did a quick search, is a little worse than was presumed initially. So he may have to have a minor surgery to repair some of the injuries to his hand and wrist from the incident, which has led to Aston I guess being a pro. They've been asked kind of if they are considering Seb coming back to be a fill-in the meantime. So that was something that was just looked at kind of yesterday. Was this report came out. but the team kind of said like, I'm not gonna tell you whether or not it wasn't like no, we're going with Drogovic, we're like, this is our reserve driver, that's where we're moving forward at the moment. They were like, are you thinking about Seb coming back? And they're like, stop, I'm not gonna answer that.
Gotcha.
Like that's the vibe that I get from reading this. So definitely a bummer that Lance won't be back, because like you said, that experience on the team, I think, and especially with Fernando being the putting the emphasis on like working with the team to help figure out things and develop the car, it's definitely a huge detriment to them from the weekend.
Yeah, it seems like it, especially when you're looking to set up the car and it could have large implications for the rest of, for the rest of the year. I think that's a big lack, I guess you would say.
Yeah, but nonetheless, I was very impressed. Alonso had the second best time on day 2, I think it was. And so had some, or maybe it was day 1, but was towards the top of the table early on. I think that speaks really well to the progress that the Aston Martin team has made, and Christian Horner even had said in an interview with Sky F1 over the weekend that Aston Martin took a big step forward this year with their car. So I think that the potential for Fernando to compete towards the top is there, and that's exciting. I'm glad that there might potentially be another team that can kind of take some points off the big boys a little bit. I don't like saying the top 6 are the 6 drivers from the top 3 teams.
Yeah, having a little bit of mix up there would be interesting. Come race weekends, and yeah, it seems like a lot of the work that Aston Martin was doing last year is going to help kind of fuel that.
Yeah, so I think that's maybe what Fernando saw, which prompted his move over to Aston Martin. Watching the Drive to Survive series, they discussed a bit of Alonso's jump, and it sounds like Lance Stroll, of course, offered him money, but had a good conversation. Or sorry, Lawrence Stroll, not Lance, had a good conversation with Alonso about the direction of the team, and also just offered him more money than what he was making at Alpine.
Right.
So I think it's exciting that he could be up there fighting for some top spots, or at least towards the top of the midfield. So
Yeah, I think that's really exciting. It was pretty easy running there for both the Red Bull teams and the Ferraris. Thinking about like the top of the table, I don't think there was a lot there. Sergio just running really well. Both of the Ferraris running really well. I think one of the cool things about the weekend was getting to check in with Fred Vasseur, the new team principal, where I think he's going to have a lot of pressure on his shoulders, but in some conversations, he was quoted as saying he's pretty confident in the engine package going into this year when asked about like reliability issues. So that, like, as somebody who was very critical of Ferrari last year, that actually gives me a little bit of encouragement, thinking like, okay, so they have, I'm guessing, figured out a bunch of what was going wrong with their engine package last year, and based on what they're seeing, he specifically quoted like data from the dyno. Things are looking better than they were last season. So I think that's going to be interesting for the top of the table.
yeah, and talking about Ferrari, they also we got to see who their new chief strategist is. So his name is Ravin Jain. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong.
Also known as Arena is Free.
There you go. But he is has an undergrad degree in physics and a master's in mathematical and theoretical physics from Oxford University in the UK. So I I'm happy to see kind of on the other side where we saw Bonato being the chief technical director and chief or kind of team principal and everything. There, I think we felt like he was taking on too many things, and obviously Ferrari's issues with their strategy last year, I think it's good to see them bringing in someone new, and I find it very interesting that the person they're bringing in has these like physics and that kind of background, because the understanding of like what's going on physically with the car, whether it's tire wear, whether it's just the way that it's driving, the way that the track runs with the aero and everything, I think can inform a strategist a lot about kind of what they should be doing, whether like that's an overcut, an undercut, different tire strategy. I think it's a good background to have to fit into that role. So I'm looking forward to them hopefully kind of strengthening one of their biggest weaknesses from last season.
Yeah, to your point exactly. Just a way to kind of break up those roles and give individuals to those roles 100% instead of like breaking one individual like into two halves so they can only ever give like 50%. I think we're just going to see a little bit more organization, a little bit more cohesiveness from Ferrari in that regard. Speaking about the chief strategist there, but thinking about other teams on the list, what were you thinking about Mercedes results? I know we started with a conversation about Lewis. What do you think about what they have going on?
I genuinely think they'll be back up in the fight for some race wins this weekend. It's something that I'll mention a little bit more kind of after the testing talk, but they looked really, really strong. The car looks like it's working pretty well. It's definitely there's some differences when you compare the teams between some strengths and weaknesses. I think from some of the videos I was seeing, there's still a little bit of bouncing that the Mercedes car has. Obviously, the porpoising isn't going to be as big an issue since they put in the technical regulations regarding it this year, from last season that will carry into this year. But I think overall the car looks really fast. George and Lewis looked like they're in good form, and I, at the very least, expect them to be competing with Ferrari, if not Red Bull as well, who I think I kind of expect to start at the top this season.
Yeah, seems like a pretty fair analysis of what they had going on over the weekend. I think I would tend to agree with a lot of that.
Yeah, and talking about Red Bull, so obviously like they are looking like they'll start at the top of the table, but I think that what everyone has to remember, and this was pointed out a little bit by one of the Mercedes senior people, was that this year's car, they are, based on Red Bull's performance last year, they're kind of expected to still be at the top at the start of the season.
Right.
All this,
it's not a big rule change.
Yeah, and all these development packages and different things that the teams are going to be implementing their car aren't here week one. They're going to be coming in the upcoming weeks. There's some packages I think already planned from some of the other teams, but with that said, Red Bull has made some development changes for the start of the season that even with them have kind of kept them at the top. So Red Bull went from having one of the highest rear axles last season with the highest, I forget what the incline is called.
Rake?
Yes, highest rake on the circuit, to now having their rear axle being about 10 millimeters lower than every other car on the grid. So they went from an extremely high rake to really like to the lowest rake on the grid, to the point that Toto had essentially said if we drove our car with that low of a rake, we would be damaging the bottom of our car. He said their floor would break if they tried to run it that low. So that's kind of nutty that that Red Bull has made that big of a change. Whether it ends up being like a key to victory throughout the season or something like that, who knows? But it's just that's a pretty significant thing to change, I feel like, between seasons.
Yeah, and I think that observation from Toto kind of speaks to that, where it's like, oh well, if we tried to do that, things wouldn't go so poorly, or things wouldn't go so well. So yeah, that's interesting because it makes it sound like not only is it a big change, but it's also a change to the drastic. So that's an interesting one.
Yeah. So, and talking about the like package upgrades, so Ferrari already has some plans to bring upgrades to Jeddah as well as Melbourne in Australia.
Okay.
So there's
Yep.
it pretty immediately Red Bull or Ferrari is going to be like outpacing Red Bull in upgrades with the Red Bull wind tunnel time and budget cap penalty. Marco or Helmut Marco, basically he was saying that they have to really economize and utilize everything very specifically, so they can't experiment as much for different packages and all, which will probably delay them a bit in terms of bringing these upgrades. So we may see Red Bull be towards the top week 1, week 2, but have some struggles as we get a few weeks into the season and other teams start developing their car a bit more.
Potentially, yeah. But it's often easier to catch up than it is to stay ahead. So we'll see how much that affects Red Bull here in the early stages.
Yeah, so it's something to keep an eye on. I think the other team though that I just wanted to briefly mention,
Yeah.
looking through, was just the Alpine team. I was surprised by kind of the significant drop in terms of lap times and places and everything. Esteban Ocon was down at the bottom of the grid in terms of lap times and everything. And he didn't really see the same kind of significant time decrease as a lot of the teams had. It seemed like most drivers were taking about a second off their previous day's best time each day. And the Alpine stayed relatively stagnant there for both Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, really not getting their times down, finishing 17th and 20th in terms of best times. So after a year where the Alpine was a rocket ship, that is definitely just a concerning. I'll bring it back, throw it back to League of Legends. That's a concerning trend to be in Diamond 2 in Korean solo queue.
Yeah, a concerning trend indeed to only be Diamond 2 in Pierre Gasly's case. But yeah, we saw him struggle last year in the AlphaTauri, so maybe it's not indicative of the car package currently. Maybe it's just Pierre struggling a little bit. But yeah, we were seeing Alpine really be in the thick of the action last year. So it's interesting, like you had said, to see them in this position. I would argue that we did see at least 1 second improvement. But yeah, for some of the other drivers, we did see like larger chunks being taken off their times. So in relation there, not as big improvements. But yeah, 17th and 20th, I don't think really what we expect from the Alpine. If you look at the way the car was driving, it seems like the Alpine is kind of on the stiffer side than some of the other cars. Like they were having what seemed like more trouble on the curbs and some of the bumps. Bahrain is just like kind of a dirty track anyway. A lot of dust, um, just a lot of rough edges, I guess you would say. So I think the pretty stiff package for Alpine wasn't really driving best on the tough to test track.
Yeah, and there's a lot of curb usage at Bahrain as well, so it's definitely not something for a stiffer car. But yeah, I think looking forward, after this testing, I was kind of batting around the idea in my head, but do you think that there are going to be any drivers that get a win this year that maybe haven't either super recently, or any new winners that we might get on the grid this season?
So based on just the individual results of each of the drivers, I'm gonna give you a I'm gonna give you a strong prediction and then like a headcanon prediction.
Okay, I'll follow suit then.
I think Zhou Guan Yu is going to get his first win in Formula One this year with the Alfa Romeo.
Okay.
Based on Valtteri being P3, he had a stellar day 2, I think it was, and ended up 10th overall. What day am I looking at?
No, yeah, day two, and I think he was top of the charts on day 2, actually. So
right.
He was P1 on the second day of testing.
I think overall, combine that with a better than average rookie season, it seems like Alfa Romeo is making like good positive movements forward. So I would heavily consider Zhou Guan Yu to possibly get a W this year. Okay. And then my more headcanon one that just gets worse every day that you watched testing is Lando Norris. I think he has the potential, like skill-wise, he obviously still has the potential to get a win, but right now I'm not sure the McLaren is the vehicle to do that, which is like really, really unfortunate. Like I just want to see my man win, and the team that he's on is like really holding him back.
Yeah, I unfortunately don't have Lando on my list of people who I potentially see, and so I've got a couple of main ones that they're not first time race winners that I think might get a win, but drivers that haven't gotten a win in F1 in at least a couple of years. But my first one is Fernando Alonso. I think the Aston Martin has the potential on a really good day to get him there. I think that would be awesome to see someone who's been around F1 for so long and is still competing at a really good level to get a win after a while. And with that, kind of one of my outside shots, just from the Aston Martin team, I think Lance could potentially get his first win as long as he gets himself back in racing condition and healthy. I think obviously the injury is gonna make that an even more outside shot, but based on the car and what we've seen from him in the past, I wouldn't put it past him. If I think Fernando could get a win, then I have to think that Lance is like a slightly more outside shot at it. But the other driver that I think has a good shot this year is Valtteri. And not that he is so many years since he won or anything. It's only been 2 years since he was with Mercedes and getting race wins. But I think last year there was really no chance of him getting a race win in the car that they had. But he had a pretty solid performance throughout the year. And I think that this season, with how the car looked at testing, there's definitely a shot if they can continue the progress. And my outside picks.
Nice.
were 2 non-race winners thus far with
You're just going to name everybody on the grid.
No.
You've named like 10 drivers already.
I've named 3, and I'm going to name 2 more. And so Magnussen and Hulkenberg are just the 2 because they haven't gotten their race win, but the Haas looked pretty decent over testing weekend, and I think that would have to be a crazy rain, weird day situation, kind of like Esteban Ocon or Pierre Gasly's kind of wins, where there's some sort of big accident at the front that takes a bunch of people out and leaves one of them up. So it would have to be a weird situation. But of the drivers on the grid and the teams and everything, they're the 2 that I'm like, okay, I think like if there's an outside shot, I mean, Magnussen got that rainy day P1 or pole position last year. So I'm like, maybe. Got to pull for the boys in Haas. I like them both.
Sure, yeah. The Uncle Sam energy do be strong. I feel like we should do a campaign and just try and drum up as much cash as we can. Get like Andretti, get a bunch of the like, US motorsport IndyCar guys to say, come on, give us all your cash, and then we're going to give it to Haas, and then just make Haas like just the winningest, and then just make America
make just Haas like, great.
Yeah.
I have, so I sent you that like picture that Haas put out of the 2 drivers with the bags.
Yeah.
And anyone who hears this part of the podcast, you can steal my idea and do it better if you want. But I cannot wait to try and make some fire memes to throw out there during races with that. Like I've already got ones I've got some ideas stirring of just basically photoshopping the words on the Chipotle bags. So the one that's initially in my brain, if the 2 Haas's collide at any point in this season and take each other out, I am putting one up there that on the one bag says suck and the other one says balls because of the previous interview with it, and I'm putting that out there on Twitter because
that's a good one.
There are so many potential options to Photoshop that into just 2 random like words that relate. It's perfect meme template. So
dude,
excited.
You got to make it. Put it in the drafts so you can just fucking the second it happens, just send that.
That's smart. Preempt meme, just like use some psychic energy to pick some memes out and just have a collection ready to go.
Yeah, it's like the Super Bowl T-shirts where they make a couple boxes for both teams depending on who wins, and then the team that doesn't win, you get to wear those if you're in Africa.
Yeah,
there's literally a whole population of people in a third world country somewhere that believe Philly won the 2023 Super Bowl.
Why'd you have to bring it up?
Isn't that so funny?
That's painful.
They're like, oh, whoa, the Eagles won, cool, and they just put on the shirt and go about their lives.
Yeah, they probably have no idea.
That's awesome.
I never thought of it that way. That is hilarious. That really got me sidetracked. But yeah, the Haas meme, I'm looking forward to using it. Looking at the race this weekend, though, I do think it. I'm excited. I'm just excited F1's back. Looking at last season, I think it's going to be a very different race this week. Obviously, we had both Red Bull cars DNF last season, along with Pierre Gasly because of engine issues. So the Red Bull powertrain at the start of last season was a bit of a clunker in terms of reliability, and so I think we're gonna have a really competitive top of the table this weekend, and I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it as well. Looking back here through my notes from last year, this seems like a track where a lot of shenanigans can happen right at the start. So we'll see if any of your Haas dreams come true if either of those boys are able to muscle their way past.
We'll see if they can shenan again.
Nice.
But yeah, I'm just pumped F1's back, and
Agreed.
I can't wait for our race companion this weekend. Check it out. Keep an eye out for it on YouTube. We'll be tweeting out on Twitter once we have that recorded, and of course that we'll be doing that. But I guess any other F1 tidbits before we move along to League of Legends?
No, not really. Because obviously we just saw a lot of Viz paint and stuff. Can't really make too many like pretty hardcore predictions because obviously there's talk about teams, hiding this or not putting this or secret strats and whatever. So yeah, I think we'll really see what teams really have under the hood come like Saturday afternoon.
I wonder if they use WD-40 to get the Viz paint off the cars.
No, I think they use the Super Bowl 2023 losers T-shirts as just wet rags. They just wipe it off and then just throw them into the shredder, feed them to their dogs.
Ooh, feeding paint to dogs does not sound like the best option, but talking about feeding, let's talk about League of Legends. But we weren't watching my most recent games. We were watching some LCK and LPL. Where do you want to get going this week?
Well, the LCK matchup is going to be a little bit longer than the LPL matchup, so let's start there. We had Hanwha Life versus Brion. This actually was a pretty interesting series, pretty even teams in the standings, and it was going to not have like large standing implications, but maybe tip the favor either way, and it was fun to check in on some of our old DRX friends in Zeka, see how he's doing. But yeah, overall, pretty fun series here that we have.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think that the matchups, and similarly to the LPL, I think that the losing side had just a few things that they could have improved upon that would have put them in a better position to potentially be come out on top in that series. But with Hanwha Life, I really liked their kind of focus on the map control throughout the series, and especially in terms of their warding. I was really impressed as you go through the series in terms of their ward placement, keeping the jungle of their opponent pretty dark to be able to really push their gold advantages when they had them.
Yeah, and it was able to make it kind of like a not a passive early game, but weren't able to find like really any openings either way. You saw teams like trading the neutral objectives. Hanwha gets the early Rift Heron, Brion gets a couple of Drakes because they're just like, yeah, you've got bottom side pressure. It was a lot of like, what they would say like handshaking. But what I thought was interesting was on the side of Hanwha Life, Clid providing a lot of value from the jungle. Like, even though there wasn't a lot of plays made, he was able to make a couple of key plays happen. I don't want to speak too soon, but I think he burned the Brion mid laner's flash in that early trade. So that puts Zeka ahead pretty unpressured on the Kassadin. So the early moves that were made by Clid were pretty useful.
Yeah, and he utilized the champion picks he had super well to really track and like make his life hell to kind of avoid him getting ahead. the Sejuani pick versus the Vi. The Sejuani could get really big if it gets ahead enough and gets tanky, gets some good ganks off. But Clid was preempting that pretty much every game. I think in game one, I'm pretty sure at Umti's red, he was there with Zeka, or it was either Zeka or Kingen contesting that red buff, getting a kill. Game two on the Nidalee, he was at Umti's red buff, picks up the first blood of the game, just getting Umti while he was a little low health and everything. So he really just put a ton of pressure on Umti throughout the series by being so proactive with his jungle pathing and really like beating Umti to the punch in almost every instance he could, especially early in the games.
Yeah, and it was unfortunate, like in that scenario, especially in game one, because Brion, like they would have been wanting to make like early plays, especially in the case where Hanwha, like the scaling is just so much more in their favor. You're trying to like flash Tibbers every time you have it available, but it was not that. What would I say? Not that open for Brion, like to make these plays. They didn't have a lot of openings. Except where it did come in was the first Baron attempt. Umti tries to get in, get a steal, and from there Hanwha Life was able to get the split push going, get the Baron minions in. But yeah, it was an interesting like team comp difference where Brion like was really wanting to get ahead early, Clid playing well in the early to mid game to kind of stop that pressure. The tables turn a little bit where now like, oh shit, now Kassadin's got his Rod of Ages. Okay, now Seraph's Embrace is done. Have we gotten a dragon recently? Oh shit, they've gotten two. And like now, like the tables are just turning. So yeah, game one was pretty interesting in that regard. Never killing Zeka on the Kassadin, but I think that would have been tough anyway.
Yeah, I think like what I was saying before we like really dove into it was that I felt like the losing team in both these series could have, with like small differences, been the winning team of the series. And so I think the biggest thing was that Clid really just out jungled Umti. I think across the rest of the team, it was pretty even, pretty back and forth, but that was the biggest gap between players and how they played in the series that really I think made the difference.
Okay.
And I did like, and it's also partially just due to I felt like Hanwha Life's game plan in the matchups. They were kind of going. They knew what they had to do to shut down the other side and were going after it. In game one, they did that in the jungle with Clid putting Umti behind and pathing, kind of following him, tracking him, and beating him to gank opportunities. In game two, they were really trying to get their bottom lane like some good solo time and like allowing them to get ahead, which I think is their biggest win condition in game two, is to have Gnar just scale until he's tanky enough to dive in and get some big ults, and have Zeka going in and kind of just causing chaos while the Lux and Caitlyn hit from the outside. So I think that was their target, but just unfortunately in game two, Morgan was a goddamn monster. He was terrifying on that Jax.
Yeah, and it was the split push pressure that he had as well. One thing the casters talked about, this wasn't really about Morgan, but in the pick and ban phase where you have the Brion, or not the Brion, you have the Hanwha Life focusing getting the Kate Lux, and from my understanding of what the casters were talking about, the Varus seems to be pretty strong into that. So it seemed like Hanwha Life was coming in with a bit of a bottom side bottom side deficit, you would say. And then to your point, yeah, Morgan having a pretty good lane in the top side against Kingin, really kind of tilted the favor there. But I think it was an early good warding from the bottom lane that kind of got the pressure rolling, where Brion didn't have to necessarily play through their bottom lane anymore, because they were able to reap the advantages kind of by themselves, to get the gold advantage rolling.
Yeah, and in that game as well, so even though we got put behind early, was able to kind of like the Vi Akali mid jungle damage coming from Brion was just ridiculous. They were able to solo out people so easily that in a 2v2 you kill one person instantly, and then you just have a 2v1 where you can just run away, and both people live. So because of that damage and all, like, I think that shifted the focus for Hanwha Life in game 3, where takes the Vi again, and I think is kind of looking to do the same thing that he did in game 2, and that was kind of done to him in game 1 from Klid's side. But Hanwha had a very good pivot in terms of their picks and everything, getting the Lee Sin to be that early strong jungler to be able to contest any ganks against the Vi. So seeing that kind of transition from like, oh, we beat you with Vi, oh, now you're taking Vi, okay, now I'm gonna beat you as you're playing Vi, and figuring out how to do that throughout the series, that kind of comes back to my point with Klid really being my standout for this matchup.
Yeah, fair enough. I think he was pretty pivotal. Life on the Lux was also setting up a good amount of snares, good amount of like pick potential, I think, for the team. Hanwha goes for the Lux Caitlyn again here, but they banned the Varus, which was the misstep that they made before. So I thought that was a good change for game 3 that they had made. But yeah, you're right. I think it was a lot about the Klid versus matchup in the jungle that kind of spelled doom for Brion there.
Yeah, and in that game 3, I liked Brion's draft too. In general, they had a lot of good scaling that they didn't have in the earlier matchup, or like better scaling, I think, than they had in the earlier matchups. That Ezreal scales super well in the late game. Ryze, of course, is ridiculous, and if Fiora can split push, she can become pretty unstoppable. But just the amount of pressure that Hanwha Life put on early in the game really shut that down, and kind of got it to a point where there was very little comeback potential from Brion. Like they had this scaling where it's like, if we can just stay even early, then late game we just crush you, and they just got beat early and just didn't have that opportunity.
Yeah, there was no good opportunity, like you were just saying, there was no good opportunity for Ryze to like get a good ult off, get a meaningful ult. There was so much vision choking at a certain point. Hanwha Life was able to just like take a Baron while they showed like 2 people in lane just farming minions. So yeah, I think there was a lot left to be desired from Brion in that third game.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, like you were saying, couple of small adjustments, and I think it could have went either way. Pretty even matchup.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think that speaks to like Brion, who is, or especially to Brion, who is down in 7th, just out of, so 1 place out of playoffs at the moment for the LCK, but they're 3 games back from being in a playoff position. So they're the top of the bottom. They're the only real mid team in the LCK right now, with the teams behind them being pretty rough and the teams above them being really competitive. So I was impressed by how well they hung with Hanwha Life, who is now 8-4, 4 games up on them in the standings. It was a really competitive matchup, nonetheless.
Yeah, I agree, and kind of an interesting look into where some of these players are that were previously highly touted, but now are on teams that are needing to maybe show a little more grit. So it's interesting to see some of these like all-star type players in these midfield battles, like you had said. But yeah, taking a look at the other top region here, the LPL. We had RNG versus Thunder Talk Gaming. Where do you want to start here with this little series here?
I mean, just looking at the drafts initially in game one, I was excited to see how this draft worked out for Thunder Talk because I felt like it had I felt like one, it was interesting, and two, that there was some potential that I saw with it. Obviously, if Gwen gets going, the Scion's not going to be able to really do too much in the split push to be able to contest. Gwen can really, because Scion's biggest strength there is getting into the team fights with the ultimate and kind of engaging on those 5v5s. With the Gwen split push potential, I was like, okay, that's there. I've really liked the Elise pick in the jungle recently. The Tristana mid, I'm like, I don't know.
Well, you get the second AD threat, so you have like good mix damage, where you get the double AP on the top side. I think that's like a big draw for that Trist mid.
Oh, definitely. That's a huge component of it. I feel like I haven't seen good enough performances on the Trist mid recently,
Sure.
and I'm like, I don't know, but like, hey, it works. It's got range. It's against Azir. It can just kind of scale.
And it at least makes sense here.
Yeah, and then the bot lane, I'm like, okay, Varus, you got some range. Leona, Varus and Leona, tons of lockdown. Like, there's good kill potential in the bot lane. But the bot lane was just massive for RNG. Gala and Ming just were like so impressive throughout the entire game. There was no real missteps from them, which was a huge part of RNG ending up being able to close that game out.
Yeah, and I think what's so frustrating for Thunder Talk Gaming in that position is like they bring so much crowd control. You have Buster Shot if you want to, punch her out of the fight. You've got the Cocoon for Zeri. You've got the whole Leona kit. You've got the Chains of Corruption. But unfortunately, like these are all skill shot based crowd controls that if like Zeri's on her rollerblading scenario, it's really tough to get the lockdown, and she's just gonna start riding over walls on you.
Yeah.
So yeah, like interestingly, Thunder Talk Gaming has a lot of crowd control to deal with like what would be a main threat in Gala and Angel on the Azir. I would say a semi-mobile mid laner, where they have the tools, but they're never able to execute because the difficulty is just like a little bit higher than you would have wanted for the team comp that you were playing against. I think a lot of it makes sense, and a lot of these champions are like quite strong in the meta right now. I just don't think they brought the right tools against the Zeri, like to keep her locked down, specifically when she's going to be like really the only one doing damage.
Yeah, well, and one of the huge components to this as well was RNG's like strategy coming into this game. They go ahead and do a lane swap level 1 and have the Zeri Ashe up top lane versus the Gwen very, very early on. And so you don't have that lockdown and kill potential that I was talking about from Huanfang and Yao Yao in the bot lane for Thunder Talk, where Scion has been notoriously that like him and Nar are that, oh, we're in a lane swap meta. These two can kind of handle it and decently farm while like in a 2v1 scenario. So I think from RNG's side, that lane swap works out really well. Sion's able to handle the bot lane fine, with Gala and Ming getting an early kill up in the top lane. But then I think other than the like really, really great play from Gala on the Zeri, the biggest issue that I was seeing from Thunder Talk was with Beishan on the Elise. Like, he was just getting picked out so much, like way too often. There are two just very distinct ones where he got picked off around the Baron, and just gives up free like objectives to RNG at that point in the game, in game one. And so that was pretty tough from Thunder Talk's side. I was like, that they had a lot of potential, and Beishan just really had some flubs that kind of took them down in that first game.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that's like a bit of a jungle support duo kind of thing, where the RNG side has so much access to vision. They should have really been roaming as a duo to clear and get vision down, especially in those tight, like, dark jungle spots. And Ming was just always ready and had the communication to just fire off those arrows, and then the team was there to punish. But yeah, I think a couple more deaths for the jungler of Thunder Talk Gaming than you would have wanted, especially being that he's such like a key part of their little skirmish comp that they have going on. So yeah, pretty unfortunate in that regard. And dude, and then game two, like, I can so appreciate wanting to look at games for like, oh, like, what can we glean here? Like, oh, maybe there's something. But like, there is moments in pro games where once they happen, we've seen too much, brother. Like, we just know it's over in the spot.
That's like a scrim, like remake.
yeah. Just like FF right now, like, is cool. Go next. But did you rewatch I think it was the second dragon fight in the bottom lane? So you can see the Varus, like, at his turret walking up into the red side blue jungle. And if you look, like, there's no vision. They don't have wards. He didn't just place a ward. Yeah. And there's some vision around there for RNG side, but he walks into the bush, like, as they're posturing around the dragon. Ming literally calls Gala. They both flash over the wall. He gets a hook on Varus, kills them, buys a 5v4 for the squad. Dude, it is like the most insanely timed blind hook, because they did not have vision of Varus for like it must have been like 30 seconds.
But they had a guess. They're like, I think.
Yup. They flashed the wall, and he was right fucking there, and it was just over. And dude, I literally went back and replayed it to like make sure. I was like, there's no way they had vision of him. It was just like an intuition play, and then, you know, RNG just proceeds to just steamroll them. But in that mode, I was like, dude, Ming is a god. That was an insane find, because then, like, the rest of the fight's just, you know, super easy. They could just clean it up. Yeah. But god damn, that was wild.
Oh, and once I will have to rewatch that part, because
and confirm for me, but I do not think they had vision of the Varus for at least 30 seconds.
I'll definitely check it out, but I believe you in that. And the other just component of like getting behind from Thunder Talk in that game, and this was more speaking to RNG, and kind of like you said, sometimes there's games that you can't glean that much from, but Thunder Talk got put on the back foot, and they did as much as they could to try and pull themselves back into it. It reminded me of like a little bit of like how Cloud9 was playing when they first got perks, where it was like it didn't matter if they were behind in the game. They were just gonna fight, and take every fight and just try and beat you by outplaying you in a team fight and taking advantages. And Thunder Talk was like, okay, we're behind, and then they're just like using everything to try and just get those kills and like scratch their way back into it. But then you just have Beishan going way too deep on the Vi, not being able to get kills. And like everyone on RNG played just like super, super well. It wasn't like this isn't game 2 is not a shit on Beishan section. That's game 1. Game 2 was just they got behind and they knew that they had to like fight to climb their way back. They weren't gonna outscale. They weren't gonna end up out damaging or out tanking RNG. So they're like, we got to brawl fast and early. And RNG was just like, no, we got this, and just ran through that second game pretty quick. So,
dude, the other thing, now that we're through like the series overall, the other thing I wanted to talk about was, dude, the fucking casters for that series. I don't know how much they've been casting together, but the synergy was so bad, and I could not tell who was the color caster, who was the play-by-play. They were like really, really not on the same page, and it made it super tough because I just kept like laughing at the cast, like, what are you talking about here?
So if I remember correctly, the Riot basically removed their funding for the LPL English broadcast, if I remember correctly. Okay. So gotcha. I'm pretty sure that most of the casters for the LPL matches that are doing the English broadcast, at least, are just kind of like super low level. Like, I don't know how much experience they have. Maybe just
gotcha.
Kind of almost,
dude, it sounds like go for lol casting.
Yeah, but it reminds me of, so like looking back, and this is, I don't want this to sound like it's a knock to the person I'm gonna say, but when Froskuren first went and became one of the LPL main casters,
okay.
I think Emily Rand maybe, well, I know she had gone to do like a lot of the stories and like news for the LPL, but when Froskuren was doing the LPL cast, like the very early English LPL casts, that's what it reminds me of, where it was like before she had developed herself as a caster and like developed like a more like professional casting approach, as opposed to just being like, I love this region and it's interesting to me and I'm gonna just give it a shot at casting. Whereas she developed into a really great analyst and like caster in some instances down the line when she had those opportunities. That's what it reminds me of. It's like,
sure,
when the it was like, oh, you used to be able to watch Chinese League of Legends, but you had to watch it with the Chinese broadcasts and not understand a single word that they said the entire time, unless you speak Mandarin. Or now we have this English broadcast that the person is brand new to casting and really doesn't have experience, but like,
right,
at least I can understand what they're saying. So,
right.
But yeah, the guys are, I'm fairly certain, and I'd have to double check myself, but I think that they took away a lot of the funding for the English broadcast for the LPL.
Yeah, and that would make sense, but it doesn't take away from the enjoyment of the game. If anything, I just thought it was funny, just like kind of how out of sync they really were. But it seemed like they were having a good time, so like that's all that really matters.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as long as they're excited, I at this point know enough League of Legends that I don't really necessarily need the casters to.
Dude, but sometimes a great
Oh
cast like heightens the game
no,
to an insane
100%.
degree. Yeah.
Changes it watching, but if I'm watching for
Your own journalistic take on it.
or just like I know enough that a bad cast doesn't ruin a good game.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So like
That's a good point.
even though these guys are like newer, don't really have it quite down yet. It I can still like gain a lot of knowledge about what I'm looking for in these games without them having to tell me.
My day's ruined.
But a great caster who is like really in tune and picking out the fine details and all and communicating that well. Whew, chef's kiss, top tier, love it.
Well, and it's less about the individual caster, and it's so much more about how they're like team working to get all of the exciting information across.
Oh, yeah.
Like
And keeping your like attention and interest, like the hype is there. They're like, or even when it's dull and boring, keep it like the amount of times that I listen to Monty and Doa talk about random ass things.
See, that was like a whole vibe, though. That was a whole vibe. It was literally like 2 a.m. on the East Coast when those games were being streamed. Like, it was a whole different thing.
Yeah. But
shout out to their cast because it was amazing.
Still kept it super fun while like even when like they had some fucking boring metas.
Sure, well, because they had to do it like lane swap meta where like first bloods were at like 20 minutes when you went to Baron for the first time.
And in the LCK when the teams were so regimented and they were
just like playing it perfectly.
Yep. You take this, I take this. You move your pawn here, I move my pawn here. Up, knight to d3. Like, fucking get out of here. And they still kept it so fun. So I totally agree. The cast can make or break it. But I think now we've gotten a pretty decent, like, look at the LPL and LCK. I think maybe in the coming weeks it might be fun to kind of start narrowing down teams in terms of maybe kind of a just generically call it a tier list with teams that we think have potential, like looking as we're kind of going to the second half of this spring split in both the regions. Teams that
got like playoff potential.
Yeah, or teams that we're looking at as being kind of the top teams that we're looking at as maybe we think that they have potential as they kind of develop some team cohesion and whatnot to move up the standings and whatnot. So I think we've talked about a good number of teams to kind of think into that a little bit, but I'm just workshopping live. So we've got plenty of League of Legends coming up in the coming weeks for y'all before we get towards that mid-season MSI Invitational.
Yeah, but no, I think that's a good idea because we are coming towards the end, and we're gonna be getting into the playoff run here. So yeah, it's gonna be good to get a sense of what teams are gonna be in contention for those slots. But yeah, just kind of moving into the tail end of the episode here. Just wanted to make a couple of comments on some Magic games that we played this weekend, and then we can move right into the flavor of the week here. I was playing some games with the Michigan crew, got a couple of games in, and there's a commander that you've heard whispers about. You've heard legend of a scary commander, but I had never played against him before. It was always just like, okay, so I knew what the strategy was, the name, the colors, but I had never actually played against the deck. And it was their friend. His name's D. Has the commander is called. Let me get the full name because they always have a comma. Yeah, so his name is Nekusar the Mind Razor.
Okay.
So he's black, red, and blue, and he's a 2/4 legendary zombie wizard for 5 that says at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. Whenever an opponent draws a card, Nekusar the Mind Razor deals 1 damage to that player. So
Oh.
right. So the idea is he's punishing you for doing what everybody wants to do in Commander and draw cards. And so the idea is he's playing like a bunch of draw 7s where everybody discards their hand, draws a bunch of cards, and just has a bunch of punishing effects in there, like 4 drawing cards. And, it's one of these commanders that you've heard about and whatever. But playing against it was like a whole different experience. He was like doubling up on that effect. So it'd be like, all right, everybody draw 4, take 8. And we're all like, all right, taking 8. And then the next turn, he'd be like, all right, everybody wheel, take 24, actually. And we're like, okay, everybody take 24. And like, it was brutal. And like, not only are you just getting like chunks of your life total just wiped away, but he's also saying like, ooh, yeah, all those cards that you were planning a strategy around, put them in the graveyard, get some more, and just like constantly getting rid of cards. So you can never really have like a good strategy. Even like off turn, somebody does something like setting up for, maybe a little bit of something else. And he's like, in response here, I'm going to crack my Magus. Everybody draw 7, take 14. It's just like, oh my God. It was a very punishing experience, but quite an interesting one.
I'm assuming.
He did win the game that he played in quite quick fashion. He was dealing a lot of damage.
How do you counter that? Do you just have to have removal?
Yeah, you really just want to either like counter the big wheels. So if they have their commander, he's not really doing anything with it. So you're only taking like 1 to 2 damage a turn, or it's just like kill on sight because if he gets on tap with it, you're taking 25 damage. Yeah. So unfortunately, there are some commanders that are in this category of kill on sight, and I think he's one of them, especially paired up with, there's a new card printed called Shieldred the Apocalypse, where whenever opponent draws cards, they lose 2 life. So like you can just stack these effects up where on every draw you're just taking an absurd amount of damage. But then here's the like flavor side of it that I find to be like very cool. So your library of cards in Magic, the flavor, like what it represents, is your knowledge as like a caster of spells. So your library is the spell book that you have access to.
It's Rise's scroll.
Right, but it's also kind of a little allegory for like knowledge just in general as well. So as you're drawing cards, you as a player like gaining knowledge, but it's like knowledge at the cost of something great, where like, yes, you're just literally consuming your whole library of knowledge, but it's so painful because it's happening all at the same time. So like there's very sweet like flavor elements there as well. So I just have to say it was a fun game, fun commander to play against, one of the like long time legacy commanders like a lot of people have talked about. It's a well-known strategy, and it was really fun to play against.
I was going to say, is that so it's a commander that's been, I know they don't always specifically design cards for commander, but there's definitely some they do. Is that a card that was designed to be a commander, or was it a card that was around? So, okay.
Yeah, so Nekusar was the face commander of the 2013 precons printed by Wizards of the Coast. So he was made like specifically for like for Commander, printed with 99 other cards. I believe he was in the 99 of that Commander deck. Yeah, it looks like the Commander was Jaleva. That was the face of that Commander deck.
And
but
you
he was in
said
the 99.
you said 2013.
2013, it looks like, yeah.
Okay, and that's still really early in terms of Commander, because, well, at least like I just Googling, it says that the first Commander was released in 2011, so only 2 years prior, with the 5 decks that they released then. But that's pretty cool that like it has such a distinct play style and such a like it's crazy that after all of these new cards and new interactions and developments in the Commander format and everything over the years, that still can be such a dominant like deck. And obviously, like, I'm sure it can to some extent be glass cannon, where if you get your stuff removed early, then you can be in a tough spot. But that's pretty cool that it's lasted this long and still has that power. I feel like a lot of games, as they develop more, some of the old characters can kind of become outdated and just be beat out by new things that are brought in.
So yeah, there are big elements of power creep in Magic. There's a lot of cards that you could look at and say, like, they would not have printed this even like 3 years ago or whatever, where it just like keeps on ratcheting up. But Magic suffers from one of the most interesting problems, which is some of the most powerful cards were printed in the very first sets. And they've realized the design mistake therein. So these cards that have existed since the beginning of time, as far as Magic is concerned, are some of the best in slot effects. And no matter what they've printed, in any of these sets, they're always a small twist or interpretation of that original effect, where it's like, you can't get a better rate for that effect. Right?
Like all of them are just like, not they're the Target and Walmart versions of the actual card. Like, yeah, so you can now just like scry 5 cards, but there's a penalty for it, not just scry 5, like
exactly.
No 0 mana cost, like whatever it is. So that's funny. But so I mean, that's smart. Like that, I think that's one of the biggest, and maybe it's something easier to do in a card game. But in like a game like League of Legends, we've seen some of the original champions that were put in get essentially entirely reworked over the years because they just were outdated and old, as opposed to being like, okay, these are the strengths of these, so let's keep their strengths strong, and things that we create that are new, let's just make sure that they have like very like significant strengths and weaknesses to balance them out. Like we've seen that in League of Legends be, like we accidentally made this too strong, so now we have to like fix this old thing.
Yeah, it's like different ways of implementing balancing in games. But yeah, it's a fun strategy to play again. So shout out D, thank you for the games. But
Very
those
cool.
were just the Commander notes I wanted to get into. But other than that, sir, give me your flavor of the week here.
Sounds good. So I'll start off with my visual medium, and so that is the show I was discussing earlier, looking at kind of meanings of life in different kind of areas of culture. but that show is called The Reluctant Traveler, and the documentor is Eugene Levy, who is the father in Schitt's Creek, for anyone who's a fan. So the Mr. Rose from Schitt's Creek, he's going, and so he is kind of all intents and purposes, he is a 75-year-old actor who is now just exploring these areas of the world with very little like initial knowledge, and it's called The Reluctant Traveler because he's like not someone who puts himself out to do, and he's doing these very interesting things. He's in Finland. He went and I guess in Finland they will, part of the longevity of life and things like that are attributed to different health things that they do, like, which a lot of the health things, as we saw with our Mr. Valtteri Bottas in a couple seasons ago in Drive to Survive, are saunas and ice baths and going into
naked saunas with your boys.
He was going into like frozen lakes for like ice baths and things like that in this docu-series, and it was just very
polar bear lifestyle,
very entertaining to kind of watch him delve. And we only got a couple episodes in, but it was fun to watch him exploring as someone who is also like, I'm a little too prissy for these things, but like you're like, I'll let you talk me into it at the same time to these people. Like I'll let you, like, I don't want to go in an ice lake. That sounds horrible. But like, if you give me a couple shots of vodka and tell me we're going to do something interesting and not tell me what it is, then like I'll hop out there into the ice lake and float out there in this little like bodysuit float thing.
I imagine the paycheck was pretty good too, though.
Yeah, it's probably not too bad, but but it is on Apple TV, so it's like
debatable.
Don't know how much they pay, but for my music this week, so Formula One on Twitter put out a like first day of school pictures for all the drivers with these little like boards that's like, it's my this season in F1. This year I'm going to do this. This is my hype song for race days. And so unfortunately, a bunch of the drivers didn't actually, I think like 5 or 6 of the drivers didn't actually put a hype song. They just put a general music genre, or just like X'd it out. Like Max didn't write shit. He just put a dash through it.
Bastard.
But I was putting together the F1 drivers' songs into a playlist, and it is both interesting to see like what kind of music they like, but also interesting in the aspect of these songs are not hype songs for a lot of them. Like, there was this one, Yuki Tsunoda's is from it's a Japanese artist, or a Japanese like duo called the Hentai Shinshi Club or something like that, and the song is very like mellow poppy and all, and like with some like light rap into it, but not like I'm getting pumped up. Like when I think pumped up, I'm like thinking rap, I'm thinking like metal, like these just get your blood flowing, aggressive. The songs are aggressive, so they get you kind of aggressive and amped up. And a lot of these songs, like Carlos Sainz's was Smooth Operator, and I'm like, yes, it's funny, it's a meme. He sang it in like radio, like driver radio things and all. But I'm like, that's not like a hype song. And so I threw them all into a playlist on Spotify, and I've listened through it a little bit. And it's just, so entertaining how drastically it shifts back and forth.
Sure.
I'm like going from Japanese pop to like God's Plan by Drake to like Lando's was like
who picked God's Plan by Drake?
Whose
choice was
hold
that?
on, I'll tell you because I was I think it was Pierre Gasly, and
dude, I was just about to say that. I was like, I bet that was Pierre.
I was pissed. So we had so Charles Leclerc was The Strokes' Adults Are Talkative. Good song. I hadn't listened to The Strokes much, but checked them out because of that. Yeah. Carlos was Smooth Operator. We've got Mr. Oscar Piastri with House Music. Great. Come on, man. Lose Yourself by Eminem for Logan Sargent.
Oh, no, dude.
None for Nick DeVries. Yeah, Pierre Gasly was God's Plan. George Russell picked Homecoming. So.
Oh, that's sick, actually.
Yeah, it's like a good hype song. Like,
that's actually dope.
I'm down. Lando Norris picked Last, which is, I think, a grime song, if I remember correctly from looking at it.
Dude, they literally used to play Lose Yourself at, like, the, 8th grade dances. Yeah. And my man's, like, still listening to them, like, going to the grid, like, yeah, this is cool.
Yep. So, dude. But it's just funny, like, putting this all into a playlist, because the tastes in music are so different. It was
people from across the world.
Dude. Well, I know. I'm not surprised, but I'm more surprised.
You sounded surprised.
I'm not surprised that the music is different. I'm surprised that the drastic swing in like energy levels, I guess, because I expected when it says like hype song, and I'm like, oh, these are all gonna be like pump up things, and then some of them are just like boppy little like tunes, and I'm just like. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what? What is this? How does this
inspired K-pop? That's what it is.
J-pop. Come on. But my to wrap my week out, my food for this week, Colleen and I got tacos from this like small chain in the area called El Limon. We're fans. It's pretty solid. Not our favorite tacos in Philly, but the closest good tacos to us in the general vicinity. Right. So
you got to have a couple of haunts depending on where you're at.
Yeah, so it does. It hits all the right tummy spots. We're happy. So some good tacos from El Limon, but that is my flavor of the week.
That's super exciting. From the lemon. Or would that be the lime?
The lemon.
The lemon. What an interesting little store name. My flavor of the week here, the album I was listening to was At Long Last ASAP. Great little album from ASAP Rocky. Big fan of that one.
That's a good one.
Some mellow vibes on that one. And to be fair, I really like the Rod Stewart feature at the end. Really ties it up quite nicely. My food here for the week, Sarah made some au jus sandwiches with some good bread, homemade the gravy, and man, it was a good time. We were dipping and dunking and just slurping it all up. That was super exciting. And then my visual medium here for the week is less of a movie or TV show, but the opening movie sequence was super magical, I will say. I've been playing a little bit of Hogwarts Legacy, and boy, is it a lot of fun. It's very cool. The opening sequence is really sweet, like I said, and just fucking gets you right in there, man. And it feels super, like, of the world, like, really organically that place. And it's just like, whoa, it feels cool to be here. Like, in a way that is removed from, like, running Harry Potter around, like, within the book stories. You know, how, you know, they had the franchise games and whatever. But, dude, this is a whole nother creature.
Get to explore a bit more, and just, like, it's, that's cool. Everything I've seen looks looks like it's a cool open world experience of a game, and so glad you're enjoying it. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's sweet. But that has been my flavor of the week here, sir.
Beautiful. Well, that, as always, of course, does wrap out the episode of this week's podcast. We, as always, appreciate everyone listening, checking us out. And just to remind you, you can check us out on Spotify, Google Podcasts. Hit us up on Twitter at Tall and Short of One. We're on YouTube. That's where you'll find the race companions as we're going throughout the season, and we will keep you posted as we put those out. But keep an eye out for one this weekend with the first race of the season, the Bahrain Grand Prix. Looking forward to it very much. But Justin, let's take the people out of here.
Yeah, just wanted to second what he said and just say thank you very much for tuning in. We really appreciate you spending your time here with us. Tell your friends. New episodes every Thursday. You know where to find us at Tall and Short of It. Has been another episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Peace out, everybody.
See ya.